So I feel like influencer marketing is usually just thought of as like Kim Kardashian and Instagram.
Right.
And it's so much more than that. There's thought leaders in every single industry, and every single industry can position themselves with brands within that to interview other brands within that industry. It makes sense for the insurance company to do it, for the recipe blogger to do it. And by having these conversations, just in this conversation alone, we're creating dozens of snippets of content that can be used to definitely drive traffic to YouTube, definitely drive traffic to your website, and develop brand authority all at the same time.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to be chatting with Ashley Segura, who's the co-founder of Top Hat Rank Marketing, and we'll be speaking at the Brighton SEO Conference, which is coming up in a couple of weeks now. So first of all, Ashley, thanks for joining. And what is your topic for your primary talk at Brighton?
Well, thank you so much for having me. My topic at Brighton is going to be topic ideation, actually.
Great. Well, topic ideation is an area that's actually transformed a lot in the last 12 months, because it used to be that you would just sit there staring at the wall trying to think of things to talk about. And now you can actually ask ChatGPT or Bard to help you come up with ideas. So will you be covering the fact that AI sometimes helps you come up with topics in your session?
Yes, and I am very pro AI. I don't think it's going to take over all of our jobs. The human element is still very much so needed, but I am including using AHREFS. They have an AI topic generator as well as ChatGPT, and specifically to use those tools to come up with similar topic ideas. So when you run through a content audit, which is something that I recommend doing once a quarter, some sites, some brands don't have the capacity to do that. So at the very least, a couple times a year would be ideal. But as you go through and do a content audit, you're going to identify what your top ranking topics are. And so ideally, if something's working really well, do more of that. So this is that concept of going to these AI tools and saying, hey, I work with a lot of food bloggers. I have a recipe post that's about baked pork chops that does really great and gives me a bunch of traffic and great social engagement. I want to create more topics on pork chop recipes. So I'll go over to either Ahrefs tool, which is a free tool, ChatGPT, and say, hey, I want to come up with more topics around pork chop recipes, and I am a vegan blogger. Or that actually is a terrible example. I'm a barbecue blogger. There we go. Barbecue blogger. So what topics should I come up with that are similar to this? And then AI will produce similar topics versus starting from scratch.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Sometimes we've got clients, and probably you and I both have this in common, where they're in categories that are a little bit boring, right? And so
Yes.
it's a little bit more challenging to come up with content ideas. I've often found that talking to customer support people at those companies surfaces topics as it relates to either how a product or service is used, or challenges that the marketplace faces that are new and had not been thought of by marketing before. Has that worked for you, or are there other sort of sources of inspiration that you've found when ideating around content?
Certainly, there's a whole back section of my presentation to where I'm simply suggesting working with your internal teams. So back when I was with SEMrush, I would talk to the customer success teams on a regular basis, say, hey, what are people's pain points when they're calling in? What are their hesitations? Or the ones that are current users and customers, why are they not using all of the tools? Why are they having confusion with certain products or certain services that we offer? And that was always really helpful when coming up with topics for sales enablement material to really either get new customers or retain the ones that you have. And that's also when you can go into I like to take sales calls and meet with our sales team and take a couple transcripts a month and throw it into ChatGPT and have ChatGPT identify what is the tone of the person that is in this conversation. What are they either upset about, or what are they nervous about? Really trying to identify the core of what was at this call and what a potential customer pain points were, or the hesitations were. So then I can go onto my content team and be like, all right, we need to create educational content to address these things, so people no longer have these fears, uncertainties, and doubts, and they have a piece of content that directly addresses this.
Absolutely. Once a marketer has sort of covered off of the vast majority, because it's endless, but you do end up eventually covering the vast majority of directly product or service related content. One of the things that I've sort of been advocating to some of my clients is sort of think about brand as a publisher. And that means coming up with content that, even if it's not directly relating to the product or service, will appeal to the audience that is your audience, right? And this is not so much in B2B, but more in B2C. So to, creating your own content, and then sometimes even syndicating it out there, not necessarily always publishing it on your own blog, but thinking about other places that it could sit. That could be branded content opportunities at publishers, or a variety of other things that you could do. So to use your earlier example about, recipes, those recipes could either sit on the individual direct customer site, but they could sit elsewhere where they might rank even better, right? But as long as it's sponsored by or mentions that product, you could end up with sort of a halo effect there. Will you be discussing stuff like that in your content as well, or is that sort of too broad?
Yeah, it's a bit on the it depends spectrum, because some industries it's really difficult to find partnership opportunities, and that's where I can see occasionally clients doing the borderline spam, like trying to quote unquote have partnerships where you drop me a link here, I'll drop you a link here, but there's no actual value added to the content. And with the helpful content that just came up, it is so imperative now more than ever to do what you're actually saying in the proper way and authentically, and say, okay, well, if you're going to have your product or service or even brand placed somewhere else, like the publisher mindset, that's perfect traditional old-fashioned marketing that still works really well, as long as it's relevant. So like if you're that baked pork chop and you're going onto a vegan site, that's not going to work.
No, it needs to be the tofu pork chop for that one.
Yes, sure. Exactly.
Another area of ideation, and sometimes in the content calendar, what gets missed is the idea that, well, YouTube's the second largest search engine. So maybe I shouldn't just be creating textual content around this, but video content as well. What's your perspective on deciding whether something's video worthy or not, and whether you want to invest in the creation of a video asset?
That's a really great question. As with anything, when I'm debating whether or not there's a new topic that I want to publish, I will go through a variety of tools, SEMrush for one of them, and look at what the competition's doing. SEMrush's topic research tool populates the top 10 articles that are ranking for that keyword. So I'll physically go there and I'll see what kind of content is within that page. Is it a bunch of images? Is it 2 different videos? I'm starting to see a lot of longer form video at the top, and then a shorter video at the bottom, and a couple shorter videos past some more copy. So they're testing different video methods, and of course, always testing long and short video. And so it really depends on what is currently ranking. And that's a good indicator that if most of the pages that are currently ranking have some sort of video element, you're going to need video too. Users are liking that, they're engaging with that, so you should replicate that as well. As far as the investment and the time behind creating a video, there's no getting around it. I mean, it is difficult to create a ton of videos. You can go to Fiverr and find a bunch of really great video editors, but usually you need someone to film, and that's the starting point. And using our phones is great. It definitely works and is usable for everyone. But an insurance company creating a video with their phone may not go as well as a recipe blogger who gets on their phone and hops on and goes live real quick.
Yeah, you make a really great point that, for authenticity in video, the video production expectations have changed in the last 10 years as far as when people are willing to accept something that's sort of man in the street style video or selfie style video. But for a buttoned up brand, it would be off brand, unless their brand is a little irreverent. I think perhaps a Geico could get away with certain things that perhaps an Allstate couldn't. But you never know. I mean, there's a lot of experimentation in that area. A lot of Did It clients have had success, with our help in sourcing influencers to co-create content together, where you sort of get a double whammy because the influencer doesn't just have their own take on the talking points, but they bring their own audience. May not have direct SEO value, but sometimes it ends up being published, in that influencer's, handle page or whatever, and that may end up ranking. But that's sort of more of a secondary benefit. But often when you do the deals with the influencers, they let you use the content, right? So then it has some potential SEO benefit. Have you been experimenting with clients with influencers in a general context at all?
Yes, certainly. And I even think what you and I are doing is a great example of this. So we're creating content in real time. You're going to share it. Then I'm going to share it with my network. And I'll continuously be sharing it just as you'll continuously be sharing it. And so it's these constant touch points. And then my company will also be sharing it. So now that's 3 streams of sharing it. So I feel like influencer marketing is usually just thought of as like Kim Kardashian and Instagram.
Right.
And it's so much more than that. There's thought leaders in every single industry, and every single industry can position themselves with brands within that to interview other brands within that industry. It makes sense for the insurance company to do it, for the recipe blogger to do it. And by having these conversations, just in this conversation alone, we're creating dozens of snippets of content that can be used to definitely drive traffic to YouTube, definitely drive traffic to your website, and develop brand authority all at the same time.
Yeah, I love the point that you make about the snippet size versions, because snackable content works in certain contexts. And then there's other folks who there's no way they're going to sit through our entire podcast. It's just right. So it's up to us and our video editors to figure out which elements of these can be sort of snipped out and turned snackable and used independently. And I've had certainly guests before who said, "Oh, can you send me the raw content too? Because I may want to slice out particular elements and cite it that way." So
nice.
Clearly there's you can get a lot more mileage out of content if you do that. What are some fun ways you can get mileage out of other forms of content besides podcasts and videos? You sort of went through the trouble of putting something on your editorial calendar, creating it, and maybe it was originally long form content, 800 words, and then you're sort of thinking about, okay, how else can I use this?
One great way to do it is to say it's a text-based, it's a blog post, copy and paste into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, hey, what are some variations from this original piece of content that I can schedule out, and what channel should I use? So it can then populate, oh, you should do an email drip funnel. Here's 4 different email segments that all base to this original content. Here's a month's worth of social media content that you should sprinkle throughout your original calendar. Here's some infographics, white papers, ebooks. Those are all great, but it doesn't always make sense for every brand and every industry. So I'm not going to necessarily reference that. But if you think of video snippets and graphic snippets as very similar to each other, you can create a bunch of different graphics out of one blog post using like one-liners from that blog post, and then attaching that into your email funnel, attaching that on social media, even doing a compilation blog post where, or even on LinkedIn. I'm seeing this so much on LinkedIn right now. The carousel posts are so popular on LinkedIn, and then it links to the original blog, but you're getting the direct bite-sized elements from the social network.
Right. I mean, those are definitely great points. It's sort of the infographic worthiness is probably the hardest part, because infographics are sometimes harder to create and more time consuming than a video, right? Because a video, you can do a talking head thing and crank it out in 2 minutes, whereas an infographic, so far I haven't seen AI do a particularly good job with infographics yet.
Yeah.
So is there a process you found to sort of decide whether or not something's worthy of putting infographic efforts behind it?
Certainly, this goes back to doing a content audit. And if you see a specific topic, a specific blog post is doing fantastic for you, that's a great indicator that your users want more of this. You're going to get search traffic for this. So expand on this. And that's when it's worth, all right. So, and you can go back to ChatGPT for this. Copy and paste the blog post and say, hey, I want to create an infographic. Create an infographic outline for me. Then you do a whole lot of editing because ChatGPT definitely needs its handheld, which is okay. That's why the humans are still here. And then you take that outline and you give it over to your designer, and they can start to work on the full-fledged infographic. And then you also have the designer create 10 to 15 different social media graphics from that.
Yeah, one other thing that I sometimes have to remind myself to do, as well as some clients, is when we do end up with a podcast or something that's published remotely, is to either have a human or a human with ChatGPT or Bard's help create a summary of it or an abstract of it and publish that summary or abstract on our blog, because we don't necessarily want to republish the whole thing. We don't want duplicate content, but for summarization or abstracts, the AIs are usually pretty good. It still requires a human to read through it and make edits, but that can be super powerful. Have you found that summarization is a tool that you use a lot?
Yes, very much so. Specifically to satisfy users' intent. If it's a informational intent, they may want a whole lot more than just 4 bullets at the top. If it's a commercial intent, then they're happy with those 4 bullets. They're just trying to get to the point and make a decision on what they're trying to buy. So it really depends on what the topic is and what the user intent is with that keyword. But I have found, personally as a user, I love those summaries. I read Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Land all the time. Search Engine Journal does a really good job of, at the very top, right underneath the title, doing like 4 or 5 bullets of, hey, this is everything that the article covers. And then at the very bottom, there's a conclusive paragraph. And so that's really helpful for someone like any of us who doesn't have a lot of time, but is trying to stay up on everything, to be like, oh, here are the highlights. Awesome. And you mentioned a version of that is copying an entire article, asking for it to summarize and do bullet points. I mean, I think that's kind of what we've always been doing and have done for so long in different forms. But now more than ever, it's really important to experiment where in the content you put that summary. If you really want to make users happy, you're putting it right at the top right away. If you're really trying to get a little bit higher time on page, probably after that header image, so they're at least scrolling down one.
Right. It's sort of one thing I've been meaning to test again, because it's been ages, but maybe you have some insights on it, is usually when it comes to creation of copy heavy assets for a site, I always have told my copywriters to use inverted pyramid style, which is the journalistic style of writing, which sort of starts off with a headline that tells you exactly what you're going to read, and then actually starts from the most important, works its way down to the bottom. So basically the headline is Butler murders millionaire, and then it tells you about the butler murdering the millionaire, which is the opposite of the story, which is a murder mystery where you don't find out that the butler killed the millionaire until you get to the last chapter or last sentence, right? So there's the 2 different types of storytelling that are inverse of each other. And for many years, we've always found that the inverted pyramid journalistic style ranked better because it puts the most important stuff at the beginning. But yet, to engage consumers, sometimes you have to do it the other way. You have to tell the story where you don't always know exactly the end until you get there. So have you found any success stories where like storytelling is a better vehicle?
Yes and no. I will say I just read an article from Google Google came out and said, all right, for recipe publishers in particular, here's some guidelines that we recommend when you're creating content, because a lot of recipes, when you go to click on that baked pork chop recipe, it's either giving you the whole history of how someone first baked the pork chop back in the 1800s, and you don't want any of that information, and you just want to go down to the recipe. Or it's about, it's your grandmother's recipe from decades ago.
Right.
and people just skim right past that and go down to the recipe to the core. So I have seen a lot of success with, in a recipe context, having jump to recipe buttons, but in a various industry, it's a jump to button to get to the meat of your content. And so then you have the, I won't necessarily call it fluff, because some people do read and enjoy how pork chops were baked in the 1800s and actually digest that content. I am not one of them. So it's still okay to have that there. But as long as you also have an option for the user who just needs to get to the point, and that usually looks like a jump to button, that's where I've kind of found the successful happy medium of satisfying all of your types of users, and then also making sure that Google sees that, like, oh, this is a great article because it has something for everyone and it's satisfying who their real demographic is.
Right. So clients have been asking a lot recently, sort of, how do I future-proof my SEO against LLMs, where the SERP may not be the one giving the answer to the consumer, but actually it'll just be giving them the answer, right? So skipping through the SERP and just giving an answer. And most of what I've been telling folks is just make sure that all your great content is fully syndicated and that you do a lot of digital PR at the same time, because similar to how the PageRank algorithm counted external links as votes, right? External content counts as a vote when somebody asks you what's the best pork chop recipe, right? The more it's mentioned elsewhere and referenced and cited, that's going to improve. Do you have any additional thoughts to add to sort of how you future-proof to, when people, when they finally get around to improving the Ask Google audio responses, or maybe Amazon Alexa finally gets smart enough to answer a question properly using an LLM, right? That will eliminate the SERP. So any guidance there?
Yeah, I think my only bit of guidance to future-proof it is to have that bullet, have that summary aspect, so that if they're going to spit out an answer from anywhere, you want it to be from your site. You want it to be coming from you. Because when the user who's asking Alexa or Google to provide more information on this, they'll say, according to barbecuechef.com, and then spit everything out in terms of additional context. I think we're a long ways away from people relying on that kind of information without then pulling up their phone and asking the same exact question. I think we're going to be in that stage for quite a while. One, from just learning models needing more time to learn, and two, from a user standability. We're still very comfortable going to our phones and choosing what piece of information we want to accept. So if one recipe says the oven needs to be 450 degrees, but another says 400 and Alexa says 425, I'm probably going to look at 3 or 4 more recipes to see what's the most frequent oven temp.
Absolutely. So what has you excited about the next year, as a final question?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Honestly, just creating a whole lot more content and seeing how users continue to change how they digest content. We talked a lot about summarizing content and offering long form and short form content for the variety of users. The amount of data that we have access to is only going to grow in a way that helps dictate what kind of content we should create, how often to create it, what kind of topics. And thanks to a bunch of different AI tools that are coming out, we have access to really streamline a lot of this stuff and be able to just put our strategy hats on and not have to focus on 1,000 executions all at once, but really focus on strategizing and putting your efforts where it counts. So I'm really excited to see what 2024 brings with the variety of content creation.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Ashley, for joining me and imparting your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.